Kiryu is the oldest looking 20-year-old ever. And in the more recent game, Kiryu is the youngest looking 48-year-old man ever. Real estate developers don't tend to announce massive urban redevelopment plans until the ink is dry, all to avoid driving up the price of properties they intend to buy. This redevelopment plan for the red light district isn't a go yet due to a land dispute, so this expositional newspaper headline shouldn't exist. There are 4 different styles of cutscene in this game: pre-rendered cinematics, in-engine, non-voiced, and these non-animated stylistic scenes that I'm pretty sure exist to save on the animation budget. I'm counting 7 10,000 yen notes, which is around $700 US. Kiryu's pay for this job is 30,000 yen, which is not 10% of 700. That's almost half. Plus you offer him a bonus of 50,000 more, meaning you would be paying him more money than what he took back for you tonight. 80s montage of sin and excess cliché. Since you and Nishiki grew up in the same orphanage and you were both inspired to become Yakuza by the same man, do you really need to exposit to Nishiki about the shared past you were both very familiar with?
昨夜11時頃、カムロ町の一角で発見された若い男性の変死体は激しい暴行を受けており、警視庁では殺人事件とみて付近を捜査中です。
I see that the Exposition News Network broadcasts in Japan as well. They even have the power to turn the TV on when news relevant to main characters is being reported, because this TV switched on right as the report of the guy murdered in the empty lot started. Kiryu and Nishiki walked right past the alley leading to the empty lot on their way to the bar, and saw no police or commotion there. It was night when Kiryu and Nishiki entered this restaurant. Now it's early morning. That must have been one big bowl of ramen. Isn't this getting a bit ahead of yourselves? The guy Kiryu beat up for the loan shark was found dead, but it's not like the police have put out an arrest warrant for Kiryu yet. This is 1988. DNA evidence wasn't a thing yet. Unless Kiryu was seen or has prints on record, there's no reason to believe the police are even looking for him. Rather than have you turn yourself in right now, I'll allow you until the end of the day to look into the murder and complicate a pretty clear-cut frame job we put together. Normally when you have a gun pointed at someone, you hold the upper hand. This loan shark puts the gun away strangely. Kuze told Kiryu to cut off his pinky and turn himself in to take the fall for the murder. He might have been able to convince Kiryu to help him had he played the good cop back then. Now that you've revealed that you were the one who set him up in order to make a power grab on his surrogate father, he's a bit less inclined to do so. Animating this guy slurping noodles would be too costly and time-consuming for an effect we would likely only use once and would probably still look terrible. Let's ruin the shot by awkwardly placing a binder in front of his mouth. Yes, focus on the product placement instead of the important character development. Redevelopment plans build around holdouts all the time, and the empty lot is a 3x3 meter patch of land right in the center. You wouldn't even know it's there. In fact, the city block is built around it as is, so future development could do it as well. The reason no one can just buy the empty lot is due to no one knowing who owns it, but I'm fairly certain there has to be a government registry that you could check. Also, I'm not sure how property taxes work in Japan, but since this land was willed to someone without their knowledge and no property taxes were paid on it ever since, shouldn't it cede to the state due to delinquency and be put on auction? Even in flashbacks to when Kiryu was a teenager, he still looks like a smoldering late 20-something. For a character who is so important to the plot based on what other characters say about him, we only see Kazama in this flashback and in a scene at the end of the game. His absence creates a disconnect in Kiryu's ambitions, since Kiryu plans to leave the Yakuza to protect Kazama from being blamed for his mistake. Yet we never see any of the relationship that drives his decision. In fact, unless Kazama communicates with angry stares, he doesn't even say anything during this flashback. I don't know. Yakuza stuff, I guess. Yakuza are not supposed to kill another family member without the boss's permission. And they are not supposed to kill civilians ever. So because Kuze can't kill Kiryu without Dojima okaying it, he lets Kiryu leave the Yakuza so he can kill him as a civilian, which is also not allowed. This seems like a confusing amount of red tape for a criminal organization. You weren't even in the room when that conversation happened, and everyone that heard it is now unconscious. As it will turn out, Dojima knows exactly who killed the guy Kiryu was framed for killing. Hell, Dojima pays the assassin who did it, so he has no reason to go along with letting Kiryu out of the family when he knows Kiryu would just become a thorn in his side in the hunt for the owner of the empty lot. They repeatedly state that the murder of the man on the empty lot makes it harder for the Yakuza to acquire the property. But the only real problem is finding the owner. The police investigation is never an issue. And when you think about it, the murder might make it easier to find out who owns the land, since the police would certainly follow up on that as a possible lead in the case. And the police can certainly check government records to find the owner. And the police also happen to be corrupt as hell in this town, so you could probably bribe them.
あなたが今置かれている状況は全て承知しています。私はあなたと会うこの時を
So you had to wait until Kiryu hit rock bottom before you could appear and help him? Kazuma was the one who asked you to look after Kiryu, but you did nothing until he was framed and nearly killed. And you knew this was likely to happen. The next hour will be spent walking around town while trying to overhear conversations the locals have about Tachibana real estate, all while being practically assaulted by side quests. I ended up getting sidetracked by one about stopping a ring of high school girls from selling their used panties. And I nearly decided that was enough for me, and I came a hair from sending Dying Light instead. After running around town to gather information on Tachibana real estate, Kiryu now has to go to every convenience store in town to buy specific brands of alcohol to convince the homeless to tell him more about Tachibana real estate. I've met homeless who would drink homemade hooch distilled from fruit roll-ups and moldy bread. They are not so picky as to demand the premium stuff. You must have paid an absurd amount of money to the power company to show off like this to Kiryu, since Tachibana's ability to cause blackouts is never brought up again. And how did you even signal to cut the power in perfect sync with the wave of your hand? Let's follow these two salarymen around a cabaret for 10 minutes while they talk about work until the other main character shows up. Majima and Kiryu are what you would call superconducting asshole magnets, since they seem to attract every overreactive asshole in Japan. Majima has so much chill that he can use it as a fighting style. No one who pulls a punch just leaves it hanging in midair. You put your arm down once the momentum has been killed, since that last inch wouldn't do anything if you spun it back up.
何でも
ああそうや
それが殺しでも
It's starting to feel like these guys are not cut out to be criminals. Majima even balks at pulling a hit on someone. I'm 4 hours into this game about the criminal underworld, and all I've done is have long meetings, talk about real estate, and recruit girls to work at a cabaret club. This guy dancing in his underwear in the middle of the club is like that viral video that asks you to count the number of times people pass a basketball. And then after it's over, ask if you notice the gorilla in the scene. The Yakuza really need to work on their surveillance. They have one guy dressed as a homeless man who wanders by on occasion, another who stands across the street and glares at Majima from a building all day, and one more on a boat that is only going to be able to keep an eye on him for a few minutes before he's so far downriver that he can't see Majima. This is all done to make sure he doesn't leave Sotenbori district. Also, if these guys are going to be so obvious that they are keeping an eye on Majima, why bother with the disguises? Sleeping on a hardwood floor every night while dreaming about your tragic past cannot be good for your back. They must have done the motion capture for this game in a bar, because most of the cutscenes have been people sitting at a table having drinks or ordering food. Can there be any worse exposition than telling the guy who was tortured after disobeying orders his own past? Odds are he vividly remembers it. See? He even has a black and white filter for it. I'm sure all of this stuff about Majima's brother is important in the other games in the series, but here in the prequel, none of it really matters.
その牧村って男はどこにおるん
それを調べるのも仕事のうちだ牧村は女たちにテレクラで男を釣らせてる
I'm not sure how Sagaba got his information so wrong about Makimura Makoto. He describes Makoto as a man that runs a prostitution ring, but Majima was specifically chosen for this job because Makoto is a woman. I'm not even sure how they expected Majima to succeed in killing him if they sent him looking for a male. Nope. Moving on.
せやからそのような人に会った時はすぐに誠さんのポケベルに連絡入れんねん。そしたらすぐに飛んできてくれはるから。
The girls who supposedly work for Makoto in the dating business even refer to him by that name. This mistaken identity plot twist already has more holes than can be justified, and we haven't even met the person yet. Maybe call and see what hours they're open before barging in to assassinate someone. Since you know Makoto works as a chiropractor, you could even set up an appointment.
こいつが牧村か
Considering this looks to be official documentation for his profession, it should tell you that this isn't Makoto.
おかしいな。すみません。誰かいらっしゃってますか？
なんやこいつ
Our hero, everyone. A man who was about to murder an innocent woman until he discovered she was blind. Even blind, I think she would know he's there due to foot vibrations and rustling clothes. During this entire conversation about her boss, his name is never brought up once, and she never states her own name despite treating Majima as a client. I hope Majima is not paying for this massage. This is more akin to kneading dough than relaxing muscles.
リー・ウェンハイやな牧村誠はどこや
リーやと何言うてんねんわしが牧村誠や
How would Lee ever manage to go by Makoto's name inside his own office where she also works? If he did, she'd be bound to hear him use it, and likely wonder why he's going by her name.
おお、タイミングや。おかえり、牧村誠ちゃん。
There! Finally, that business is out of the way. Makoto is the blind girl. Was it worth it, game? Lee survives this. Putting a sudden stealth section into a game is bad enough, and making it a stealth escort mission is worth 2 sins.
もう逃げた。すぐに会えるはずや。
本当に
Nice try, game, but you wouldn't have me lead her by the hand all the way here if Majima was just going to kill her after getting away. What kind of tailor lets you walk in off the street, buy a suit, and has it ready for you same day without alterations to make it fit? Chapter 5 focuses on Kiryu learning the ins and outs of being a real estate agent. I'm not misleading you here. It's an hour-long set of story missions that teach you how to hold meetings and run a business instead of moving the plot along. This game can be so slow that you could bring water to a boil with an angry glare before major events start happening. The Yakuza grabbed Oda and beat him half to death to get him to reveal where Kiryu is, but the only reason they want Kiryu is because they want him to tell them where Tachibana is, something Oda would actually be far more likely to know. How is Kiryu having a flashback to the dead guy he's accused of killing? He left him alive, yet this flashback image is clearly after he was killed.
明日連絡します。どうかそれまで堂島組から生き延びてください。桐生さん。
How about you take him with you to wherever you are hiding from the Yakuza? It's important for Kiryu to stay alive, and he's being hunted because they want to find you. If you are safe wherever you're hiding, Kiryu should be as well.
ヤクザに追われてるんでしょあんた。うちの店ちょっと作りが特殊でさ。裏から
This was part of the plan. First have waves of Yakuza attack Kiryu on the street, and in the off chance he wanders down this street while fighting, there would be a stripper to trick him into entering the strip club's backdoor access into the sewers where Kuze was waiting for him. Kiryu survives this. His forearm should at least be shattered. That isn't how forearms work. Repeated, boss fights. Kiryu could have popped out of any manhole, but Awano was confident he would exit through the disco's private sewer access.
こっちに来いや、キリ。今、あの不動産屋、Tachibanaを俺に売りゃおめえは勝ち組。
This is now the 4th time between you and Kuze that you tried to get Kiryu to work for you. At some point, I have to believe you will get the message.
てめえ。
I'm starting to think these translations are taking a few liberties. Plan B of shooting an innocent woman to death in front of you didn't work. I'm all out of ideas. As good as this scene with Nishiki offering to mercy kill Kiryu is, the fact that this game is a prequel to the other games means you already know how it ends. I'm going to take your car and leave you stranded out here by the side of the road. Thanks for being a bro. Majima is closely monitored by the Yakuza, but for no explainable reason, they can't watch him enter this warehouse with the girl he's supposed to kill. Nor did they notice the chase through the streets last night.
ああ、そろそろ来ると思っとったで。案外遅かったやないか。
俺が来ることお見通しやったっちゅうんか。
That's a lot of confidence you're placing in a man who was sent to kill the girl you protected. First, you couldn't even be sure that Majima got away with Makoto. And second, why would you assume he would come looking for you and discover the whereabouts of a hidden Chinese clinic in a mahjong parlor?
わしは一度な、殺し屋っちゅう人種と麻雀打ってみたかったんや。
You have one odd bucket list, buddy.
やるかやらんか聞いとるんや。
Well, that requires you to tell him what this is. You asked him if he would do anything to make the situation right, and expect him to answer right now without knowing what he has to do. And you don't even tell him what you have in mind after he agrees. Majima has been coming and going from the warehouse all day, and only now the game decides he needs to cover his tracks by taking a secret route so the Yakuza can't see where he's going. I'm sure they won't question why he never left the acupuncture clinic, or how he then showed up in his apartment without leaving. And to top it all off, Lee had Majima head to the warehouse so they could talk about his plan. But since they can't mention it in front of Makoto, Lee drugs her. Just meet in a coffee shop or something.
その写真の女はな、誠の身代わりや。
In just one afternoon, Lee found someone who is nearly identical to Makoto, but with one major difference. She is a murdering criminal. That way, killing her in place of Makoto and claiming it was the real one wouldn't be so morally dark. Since Lee is a former gangster himself and was the one who rescued Makoto from the human traffickers during a hit, how come she never realized he wasn't just a chiropractor? Not exactly the type that fights their way through slave trader hideouts and rescues young girls.
お前にも手貸してもらうで、真島。お前の雇い主に誠殺した報告してもらわなあかん。
Majima couldn't kill Makoto, so why come up with a plan to kill another girl who looks just like Makoto and claim it was the real one when you know he's not cut out for assassination? After Majima threw the photos and outfit in the garbage, someone watching Majima retrieved them and killed a lookalike for him, despite the fact that the only thing in the bag were photos and a uniform, no address or name of the girl or even a hint of what Lee's plan was. But this guy sussed it out and did the deed himself. Then somehow knew Majima would be at Lee's clinic in the morning to watch the news report so he could call and tell him to meet at the cabaret. Since you were talking about killing that girl in front of the club hostesses, all of them now know that their boss Majima is involved in some shady stuff.
貸し切りにしてもろたんや。
I think you should consider bringing a credit card when making large purchases like renting a club instead of bags full of money. And how did Majima possibly miss said pile of money while talking to Nishitani?
せやけどどないしよう。真島君の流儀も大事や。けどわしもはよ、あんたとやり合わな。もう収まりつかんで。
For anyone who has read Ichi the Killer, you will instantly recognize Nishitani as a blatant ripoff of Kakihara, minus the sadomasochism. For those of you who haven't read Ichi the Killer, congrats on still having a positive outlook on life. Coincidentally, I couldn't help but notice that Ichi the Killer is also a story about Yakuza and valuable real estate.
わし、キャバレーグランドの支配人ですわ。何？今、頭おかしなったヤクザが店でドス抜いてますね。
You came here to negotiate with Majima for Makoto after you killed the body double for him. If you get yourself thrown in prison just so you can fight Majima, then you can't fulfill your own duty of finding Makoto. Your reason for coming here just went up in smoke.
牧村誠だ。やったんだろう。ニュースで見たよ。蒼天堀に浮かべるなんて随分派手じゃないの。
Sagawa thought Makoto was a guy. That's how he described him to Majima when he gave him the job. Now Sagawa sees the dead fake Makoto on the news, who is female, and doesn't question the target's change in gender.
一緒に逃げないの？
俺はこの町に囚われの身や。一緒におるとかえってあんたらが逃げきれんようになる。
They're looking for her just as hard as they keep an eye on you. If Lee can sneak Makoto out of town, then he can get you out as well. He survives this.
このままほっといたら、こいつ死んでまう。
You see Makoto as a daughter, yet the guy who led Sagawa's men to the warehouse is more important to you right now? This is really because the devs want to recycle that stealth mission again, and that only works with 2 people. Anytime you see a close-up of Karki starting a car, you can pretty much guess what happens next. They survive this. Makoto should at the very least be deaf as well as blind.
二人一緒に殺してあげるから。
And now, to pull the trigger as slow as humanly possible. I'm sure nothing will stop me before I finish pulling the trigger. Any moment now, your fate will be sealed. It's the river Styx for you, my friend. Just a few more millimeters. Sagawa survives this. The characters in this game are made of that cliche. Meanwhile, the Dojima family just discovered Kiryu's back twin, a person who looks just like you, but only from behind. Instead of burning Kiryu's apartment, maybe let him return home and ambush him while he sleeps. Hold on a minute. Kiryu left Nishiki on the side of the road out in the woods after taking his car. Yet Nishiki is already back in the city at the same time as Kiryu. Repeated, repeated, repeated. Boss fights, boss fights, boss fights. I honestly question whether that would hurt Kiryu. I mean, he just took a bat to the head a second ago. Tachibana's car kept going after running over Kuze. Yet when he stops, he's right next to Kiryu, who was on the ground in front of Kuze when he was run over. You guys have cars too? Get after them. You would think a rich real estate company would have no shortage of properties where it could hide Kiryu for a time instead of leaving him in a homeless camp in the park. I'll say, you are the only one in Tokyo even using the freeway right now.
俺たちもそこに向かってる。だからどこなんだ？言わなくても、お前にはそろそろわかる。
You could still answer his damn question. It's not like it matters if you surprise him with a destination. After accepting Tachibana's money to call off the hunt for Kiryu, the Tojo clan chairman has them run a gauntlet through his mission that might actually kill them. They just paid millions to keep the Yakuza from doing this very thing. Do you think Tachibana asked Oda to stop the van somewhere where he could look out over the water and talk about himself? Because they could have had this conversation while driving.
その殻の一坪の所有者は牧村誠という人物です。
I feel bad for video games when they try to pull off twists. Due to the nature of interactive fiction and the length of time you spend with one over a movie, it becomes really hard to keep something hidden, which lets jaded, ego-driven people like myself feel smug for seeing through it fairly early. But really, everyone who played this had already assumed Makoto was the owner of the empty lot ever since she was introduced, mainly because there wasn't any other option. So let this be a lesson to you. Sometimes red herrings work. Why would you punch him with the hand someone shot? And you were getting around very well for a man who was shot in the back last night.
でもその前にあの牧村誠を盗んでいった泥棒猫を始末しねえとな。
So your plan was to first beat Majima to a pulp, then give him a second chance at killing Makoto after finding the guy who took her. He couldn't kill her the first time. What makes you think he would be able to do it now that he's gotten to know her? In order to get into prison to ask Nishitani about the guy who took Makoto, Majima has to talk Detective Billy Ken into helping him. It just so happens that the detective also runs an underwater bloodsport arena where criminals and terrorists from around the world fight each other to the death, and he wants Majima to fight in the next match. The next words out of your mouth should be, "What?"
なんで殴り合っとるん？この闘技場で1年間戦うたら茶場に戻したるっちゅうだ。
So you take these criminals, and if they survive a year, they get to go free, having become all the more stronger after a year of fighting. Sounds like a great plan you put together, Chief.
楽しみや。わしは強いもんを見るとな、あそこが固なってしまうんや。
Nishitani gets hard for repeated boss fights. The prison guard kept Nishitani's cell locked, and you can even hear him lock it back after letting Majima inside. Yet now, Nishitani can just casually open it. So how come Sagawa can survive being shot in the back but Billy Ken can't? There were guys in the other cells when Majima was brought in. During this commotion, all the cells are empty. Majima was handcuffed and brought into the jail so he could find out from Nishitani who took Makoto. After achieving that, the guard they paid off kills Detective Billy Ken on orders of rival Yakuza. Then kills Nishitani, but not before Nishitani manages to kill him. Majima is the only one left alive and just walks right out of the prison even though he was booked and there would have to be a commotion after the gunshots. And the police never searched for what would be the lead suspect in the murder of 2 police officers and an inmate. I should have to remind you that Kiryu is wanted by the cops for allegedly killing a single civilian. But this never gets brought up. Would it really have been that hard to put some other cars on the road during driving scenes? It's very weird when there's only one car on a freeway or bridge.
待っとれよ、誠。
You do know that if you find Makoto in there, Sagawa is going to kill her, right? The Nikkyo Consortium have a rather eccentric dress code. Hanya mask and men dressed as geisha seem to be the company standard, which is fine if you're putting on theatrics, but these are supposed to be the elite of the Tojo clan. To prove that I'm on your side and not your enemy, I will now fight you and attempt to kill you. Surprisingly, this tactic seems to go over pretty well in Japan.
不動産会社？なんで不動産屋が？
本人も知らないところで牧村誠は土地の所有者になっていたんだ。
This needlessly complicates things. You are working with Tachibana. All you needed to do to protect Makoto is buy the land from her and boom, problem solved. You've had her in your custody for a day. More than enough time to draw up a contract. Shots to the back sure seem to happen a lot in this game. Also, Sarah survives that. All the porn stars on display in this store are clearly not from the late 80s. Time to pad the runtime some more, so let's have Kiryu run around Sotenbori until Sarah calls Oda. There are not even any side quests for Kiryu to do in Sotenbori, since this is Majima's turf.
桐生、右車線、後ろの車。少し前からずっと同じ距離でついてきてる。
Well, it is a fenced-off freeway with no exits as far as I can see. All of the cars behind you can only drive in this one direction, and you have to do 3 right turns before you can be certain a car is tailing you. Also, as we soon find out, Oda ratted them out to Shibusawa for his own reasons, so giving Kiryu a warning about the car, then handing him a gun is counterproductive to handing Makoto over to Shibusawa. Maybe yell a warning to the driver Kiryu instead of grimacing. I think this game temporarily forgot that Kiryu never kills anyone. The Yakuza now have access to helicopters, RPGs, and miniguns. Up until now, the deadliest weapon they've carried is a katana. This game just took a weird turn. Outside of the wacky side quests, the main story has been a down-to-earth crime drama. Now here is Kiryu shooting RPGs out of the air. Remember, Kiryu is out to prove that he's innocent and didn't shoot that man in the empty lot. I'm sure shooting dozens of men in a freeway chase and shooting down a chopper will go a long way in smoothing that over.
血は大丈夫じゃねえんだよ。
How come the blind girl flinched to a raised hand she can't even see? You were worried that Tachibana would discover that you were the one who originally sold Makoto to human traffickers, but you also know that Makoto is blind and could not recognize you by sight. All you had to do was keep your mouth shut around her and she would never know. But you went out of your way to talk to her upon picking her up from Sarah. Now that we know Oda was working with the Yakuza to get rid of Makoto, what was up with that time they beat him half to death and dragged him to a bar? And how come the Yakuza could never find Tachibana even though Oda was leaking information? -1 sin for the amount of work they put into smushing out that cigarette animation. That's dedication to a detail most wouldn't bother with.
でもアジア街ならこの子を連れて一緒に行けばいいじゃない。
堂島組に狙われてる。
You have no idea how many times I've started writing a good sin before having to delete it because the game points out its own bad logic so it can quickly lampshade it. But here's something they forgot to lampshade. Instead of leaving Makoto in the homeless camp, Kiryu could have walked her across the street to Little Asia to meet her brother and avoided what's to come. They really were not that far from Tachibana. If you were shot in the leg and shoulder, you were not going to be up and running 3 hours later. I've seen this move so many times that I've actually tried to replicate it. Turns out that it's impossible to remove several layers of clothes just by tugging on your left shoulder. Kiryu must have a healing factor, because he was shot in the shoulder and leg a few hours ago, yet you wouldn't know that by looking at him now. Tachibana doesn't survive this, but he does remain alive far longer than anyone who just took a sledgehammer to the skull has any right to. They should have to prop Tachibana's body up Weekend at Bernie style for any further scenes. My repeated boss fight sin was not designed for 4 iterations of the same boss fight, so I'm just gonna head out 4 additional sins for hurting my precious meme's feelings.
ラオグよ。操ってんのは堂島宗平です。
So Dojima was the real culprit behind framing Kiryu in order to take down Kazama through responsibility for Kiryu, even though he has no real reason to want to do that since Kazama worked for him, and he had a guy killed on the empty lot even though that would complicate his plans to acquire that property. Yet Dojima is also the one who let Kiryu leave the Yakuza despite the problems that would cause.
牧村誠に指一本でも触れてみろ。俺が東上界を潰す。
Kiryu promises this, but immediately loses track of the blind girl who then nearly gets herself killed. Kiryu, I understand the sentimentality behind this, but you shouldn't be leaving a second body with your prints all over it in the empty lot. This game has convinced me that Japan is one of the most dangerous countries in the world. You can't walk down the street without being mugged or watching one take place. Meanwhile, police ignore violent gang wars in the street and shootouts on the freeway. But so help you God, if they find a dead man in an empty lot, they are on you like... Actually, come to think of it, the police have not come after Kiryu once, despite the game repeatedly reminding me that he is wanted for questioning.
そいつを近江が抑えちまえば再開発に絡む東上界の島を一気に奪える。
The empty lot is but a 3x3 meter parcel of land in a city block, and the Tojo clan already owns all the other buildings around it. At best, the Omi Alliance can get a seat at the table in the district redevelopment plan. Owning the lot doesn't change who owns the rest of the property that will be sold to land developers later.
そもそもな、真島。わしがお前に牧村誠を殺せ言うたんは。
For those with subtitle allergies, I've taken the liberty of dubbing this scene for you. I'm going to have you kill a girl that owns a bit of property, but I know you won't kill her, and because of this, I know I can entrust the life of a blind girl in your hands so you can gain her trust, so that it'll be easier for me to buy the lot from her. And I'll fuck with you to make it interesting. But doesn't that seem a bit contrived? No.
で、兄弟の狙いは何なんだ？殺せと命令してまで牧村に真島ちゃんを近づかせた理由は？
信頼を得るためや。
Why not just order Majima to find Makoto and keep her safe? Saving someone's life also tends to generate trust. And even if you knew Majima wouldn't kill her, you still had no plan for getting Makoto to you since neither Majima nor Sagawa knew that you actually wanted her alive. She's only here in Tokyo now because of the actions of other factions that want the lot. Furthermore, how did you know Makoto was the owner? Shibusawa only learned who it was from Oda. But you were a different faction and was not privy to that information.
なるほど。愛か。
せや、女から見れば殺し屋のくせに自分を助けてくれる真島ほど信頼できる男はおらん。
You had no idea what kind of person Makoto even was. If your plan can be derailed by a person already being married or a lesbian, you need to rethink it. According to Nishiki, Makoto ran away after Tachibana was killed. She somehow got away from Kiryu and Nishiki despite her partial blindness. Then Majima finds her back at the empty lot. Even with her recovering from her post-traumatic stress blindness, she wouldn't be able to find her way back there since she didn't know where it was to begin with.
組の3人の幹部、そして堂島宗平。
俺にそいつらを殺せっちゅうんか。
もともと私のことも殺そうとしたんでしょ。
Yes, and he failed horribly at it.
なあ、たこ焼き食いかんか。
Smooth.
いい人じゃないね。
ぐだぐだ言うとらんとさっさと焼けや。
いい人です。
At some point during this game, you would think Makoto would have asked Majima his name, but she never learns it solely for the sake of the bittersweet ending.
もう一個食べない？私買ってくる。
ここにおれや。まだ目がよう見えんのやろ。
Majima falls for this. Makoto ditched Majima and left a message with a homeless man for him to meet her on the roof tomorrow at 5. Her plan is to turn herself over to the Yakuza so she can offer a deal to Dojima. For some odd reason, her plan also included telling Dojima's men that Majima would be on a roof at this time. Don't know exactly what she was going for there. Makoto survives this. Yeah, all the Yakuza fans are going to tell me that Lao Guai intentionally shot her so she wouldn't die immediately. And this is all part of Shibusawa's plan to use her to find Sarah. But he had no idea that Majima or anyone was coming to rescue Makoto, so she would have bled out on the floor after they left in the chopper. And And hell, if Shibusawa wanted Sarah, they could have waited 5 minutes until he showed up. You have to admire Makoto's level of naivete. She delivered herself to the Yakuza to offer her price for the lot, the heads of Dojima's lieutenants who are responsible for the death of her brother Tachibana, and thought that if he refused, she would just be able to walk out and sell it to someone else.
あの土地の相続権持ってんのはもうこの世にあんた一人しかいない。
Considering that Dojima wanted Makoto dead so she could never cause trouble for the redevelopment plan, you would think he would check for a pulse before leaving. Let's just tack on another 5 sins for the 5th time I've had to fight Kuze. Earlier, when Shibusawa tried to take Makoto, the guy mobilized dozens of armed men in a helicopter with a minigun. Now that he has victory in sight, the best he can manage is guys armed with swords and pipes. Ask yourself how these guys are avoiding shooting the man in front of him since they are practically lined up. Awano's doughy face really doesn't match his body type or his lifestyle, since his whole character is about leisure and enjoying the good life. Cool shot, but how did Lao Guai open the door if he was standing that far back from it while holding a gun? Majima is naturally good at inspiring people he just meet and beat the crap out of to act as meat shields for him. Shibusawa wanting to surpass Kazama would have meant a bit more if we had ever met Kazama. He was only seen in one flashback and had no lines. I have no idea why the guy is supposed to be so awesome. Shibusawa's physique changes noticeably after a battle strip. His forearms and shoulders gained a couple inches. After all the other characters that I believe died only to see them up and walking later, I'm half expecting Oda and Tachibana to come walking in right as Kiryu gives Shibusawa one for each.
超えちゃならねえ。その一線超えちまったら戻ってこられなくなる。こいつ殺したとこで。
Yeah, Kiryu, you can't go around killing people. You were only a violent member of an organized crime syndicate. What would people think? And never mind all those people you shot and killed on the freeway.
そいつらを殺すのか、マジマ。
当たり前や。こいつらがおる限りあの子は。
彼女がそれを知ったら苦しむだろうな。
She asked him to kill them for her before going to Dojima and offering the lot for the heads of his lieutenants. I think she'd be just fine if Majima killed Dojima and the guy who shot her.
殻の一粒はもう彼女の手を離れました。うちが新しい土地の所有者です。
You should have done that days ago after you took her from Majima.
カムロ町再開発の莫大な利権は殻の一粒を持つ人間にしか動かせん。
No, that's not how real estate works. Just because you own a tiny plot of land in the redevelopment zone doesn't mean you essentially own all of it. All you can do with that land is sell it to the developers, and the more land you own, the more money you stand to earn. Dojima still owns practically all of the land surrounding the lot.
警察にもその情報は流しておいた。
殺に突き出すだけで済ませろっちゅうんか。
その殺し屋の身柄は日教連で隠し持つ。
Is that how it works? You just tell the police that you found the true murderer? No need to look for Kiryu anymore, officers, and let us take care of the culprit. For some reason, I feel this game was just an excuse to show the origin story behind Kiryu's outfit in later games. Kiryu gets an outfit to show a new beginning. Majima gets Peter Parker's haircut from Spider-Man 3 to show the same. It's like poetry. Majima buried Makoto's watch that she left behind in the warehouse under the empty lot and set the alarm to go off, seemingly knowing that she would be here at this specific time to leave flowers for her brother.
Yo. Kiryu-chan!
I know you two have a ton of history in the other games, but this marks the first time you've ever met, so Majima has no reason to be this excited.
It's free real estate.